What would happen if I took a chance? It's always hard at first glance. I don't wanna, but I know I gotta do it. The truth is hard to swallow. I think I'll chew it.
A few years ago, I started writing a fictitious story based on my time as an educator. It is called Taught, and the story was partially inspired out of anger and frustration fueled by burnout. Okay, actually, it was more than partially inspired by anger and frustration. But Taught has also become a vehicle for me to tell what I thought at the time, and in some ways continue to think, was and is the real story of teaching. I now realize that my perspective is not everyone's perspective, but there are some pieces of Taught that resonated with many educators. This podcast is an extension of that story, and I, a former teacher, will interview other educators asking them to share how they really feel about the current state of education. Why are so many teachers burn out? Why are so many, like me, leaving the field? We likely won't solve any problems or come up with any solutions, but we can create a community of voices that maybe begin the conversation around how educators can take back teaching. I'm Melissa LaFour. Welcome to Taught, the podcast.
I like to be educated, but I'm so frustrated.
Okay, so this is your magic wand moment.
Oh,
And
okay.
You don't get to use it for just anything either. So you only get to choose one thing.
I know you're going to kill me
Thing
with this.
You would choose that you think would improve education.
You're killing me with that one.
And everybody wants like 3 to 5, it seems like is.
Absolutely, absolutely. So mine has to be the negativity, right? And I really think that when we're looking at school systems, when we're looking at what we're doing and what we're facing, I think it's so important that school systems balance the the negativity with the positive. And not only the school systems, but our news broadcasts and those kinds of things. Now, you know, I do not want to, and I want to be very clear with this. There are many things that are negatives and challenges that we must address. Student safety absolutely needs to be addressed. School shootings must be addressed. You know, just providing safe environments for our kids. And that means all kids. So they must be, really talked about, debated, and discussed. But at the same time, there's a lot of wonderful and fantastic things that are happening in our education, buildings and those kinds of things. And I look at it this way. In the international and private school spaces, you have a marketing team. You have a communications team. In a Fortune 500 company, they spend millions, if not billions, of dollars on marketing themselves and communicating what is in their best interest. Schools do not do that. And I'm talking about your everyday building. I'm talking about your district, and I'm talking about the departments of education at the state level. How many times do we hear from the Department of Education at the state level? We hear about it when there's a shooting in a school. We hear from somebody giving thoughts and prayers, to the families.
Or budget.
But,
You
or
hear about the
budgets.
State Department for budget. Yeah.
Absolutely. But what about, students that are doing just absolutely phenomenal things, right? What about the students that have achieved beyond what we would expect? What about a teacher who goes above and beyond? We all know in every building there is at least one, if there is not five, that go above and beyond. What about those administrators that go above and beyond? And there's all these stories that never get shared. Now, I think the private schools do a little better job with that. They really communicate better within their community. International schools in our marketing, because we're international schools, we did a little broader than that. We did outside our community. So it wasn't just sending things out to our parents and then having the parents invite friends or that kind of thing. We actually reached out to the community as a whole and more broadly, and shared some of the good things that we were doing. And I just think of, like, in Birmingham, in the school I worked at, Pembroke, we would go every fall. We would have a day called the Great Rake. The whole entire elementary school would go out, and the school, I think it was the community service organizer, or liaison. They knew in the neighborhood of elderly, people that were not going to probably get their lawns raked or whatever. And then they would go with them with the Council of Aging ahead of time and say, our great rake is on this day. Would you be interested in having kids come and rake your lawn for you and pick up twigs and all those kinds of things? Well, obviously this happened several years in a row. And so, we got a following, right? And next thing you know, there was a waiting list. We had a waiting list of people in the neighborhood that wanted the kids to come and rake their lawns for them. And so it was this fantastic program. Who knew about it? Nobody. No, nobody ever heard about it. Our parents were ecstatic. The neighborhood around our school was ecstatic, but nobody outside the community, nobody outside that community knew about it. Birmingham City, other elementary schools never even heard of it, didn't know about it. And this is what I'm saying is, we have plenty of stories to share like that. And if we had budgets, if we had the resources to have a true marketing team, to have a true communications team like industry does,
Yeah.
I think that we really could push back on the misinformation of the Tims and PISA reports, misinformation of, we're not doing well, and again, part of that is what's happening now, going back to my original mandate of what the schools really are there for. It's free education for the masses to provide basic academic skills, a healthy lifestyle, and to prepare kids to be productive and positive citizens. And when we look at what's happening now with the trades, trades are now starting to come back in the schools, because we had that era of, college bound, right?
Mhm.
Everybody had to go to college. And now, we're seeing the era of that. And we're saying, trades are really important. And so, you know, again, it is this idea that some of these schools are doing fantastic internships. Alpena High School has an agreement with the power company up there, Alpena Power, that they will teach kids how to be linemen, and starting in high school. And they start working with them, and they start building apprenticeships and things like that. Do you know how much a lineman makes?
I have no
A,
idea.
a lineman is it's pretty close to six figures. I mean, they're like 80, 90, $100,000. And that's a well-paying job. That's a very respectable job. and you don't need a college degree, and but nobody hears about that. And
Right.
there are schools across this country that are doing those kinds of things. And what we hear in the news and what we hear from schools and departments of education are about the shootings, about some of the social strife that's happening, and all those kinds of things. And so I think if I could change one thing, if I had the magic wand, I would give our public schools more resources for marketing and communications so that we could really actively combat the negative news that we hear, and some of the misinformation that is out there.
Because right now that job is falling on our administrators, our teachers,
Absolutely.
and our PTOs,
Yes.
none of whom are equipped
No.
to nobody has time to sit down and put out all the good things, right? I mean, because we're
Right.
working, we're doing the work. So, I think that's a great one. I've not heard that one yet. I like it, Tim.
Well, good. Yeah, I thought, that would be a little weird, and I thought that might be a little out there, and because I think, people are assuming if you could change one thing, you'd change, school safety, and God knows I wish I could, but I really think that, part of the school safety could be answered by having people feel better about their schools. Think about it. If you have pride in your school and you're a student, and even if you're a struggling student, but there's a lot of good things happening and you're hearing a lot of good things about your school, you're going to have some pride in that school, right? But if you go home every day and you go home and you say it sucks, and then your parents say, yes, you're right, it does suck, and then read in the paper how much your grades are down and how much da 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 da. Well, you kind of fall into that trap, and
Yeah,
it's a
it's
it's
a
a
bit
spiral.
shameful. It's a bit
Yeah,
shameful to be associated with all of that.
right,
So I think this goes back to that community collective thing again. If your neighborhood school is being recognized for raking leaves and you're part of that community, you instantly feel pride and you want
right,
to share that with others. If your neighborhood school has had an attempted school shooting, you feel the shame and the fear. So I really think you should take this act on the road right here, sir, because this is a game changer, and it's something to I sit and ponder this stuff all the time because I have nothing better to do, and think about my podcast, but this is something I had never even considered, and 100% just flooding our social media with positive things that are going on within the education system would change the collective mindset that people have about education. I believe that. Ooh, that's a good
right, right. And yeah, like, again, I want to be very clear on this, because I also think this is so important, and this is what sets America apart from other countries, in many, many ways. We not only allow, but we encourage debate, discussion. We encourage disagreement. And I'm all for that as long as it's done civilly, but I'm all for that. And I think that's important. And so we do need to address these challenges that we have. And those challenges are many times negative challenges that we have, and we've talked about it. But I'm looking for balance. And right now, in my personal opinion, we're out of balance where negative is being really showcased, at the detriment of our kids, our schools, our communities, and our country, frankly. And I think if we had more balanced, positive to negative, I think we would all be better off.
I wrote about, well, you probably don't know, but I wrote about this in my book. And
Oh,
I former debate teacher right here. So you're speaking my language, but I'm going to move on to my next topic for you, which
all
is
right.
so we've done quite a few episodes around trauma. Um,
Yeah,
just the trauma that's happening within the system that we're seeing with students, families, the lingering trauma of the pandemic, secondary trauma, how teachers are affected by that, and firsthand trauma. And so I've started asking, since the beginning, I've asked guests um, to share an experience where they had either firsthand or secondhand trauma directly from being an educator, because I do think that this is a piece sometimes that's lost on the public, is just the sheer amount of really tough situations that educators are forced to be a part of. So, can you share one of these moments from your career with us to your comfort level?
yeah. This is difficult for me because it has been more than 15 years, and this one still haunts me. This one still haunts me. Um, I actually wrote down a few things because it's it's an important story to share. As horrific as it is, I think it still needs to be shared because it gives, I think it gives some insight into um, what are some of the challenges that educators are facing every single day, and there's so much unknown, right? Um, so this idea of secondary trauma, I think, is really important, and they do experience it, and it has a very, very profound effect on their well-being and their career. And I have to say that part of burnout is the toll that the secondary trauma takes on teachers. Like I said, it's been more than 15 years, and this story, like I said, still haunts me today. And this is something I honestly I don't share with a lot of people because it's just not pleasant to talk about. And I will make it as PG as possible. Um, and so you know, school shootings and safety, they traumatize the whole community, right? Everybody's just devastated, and teachers deal with the day-to-day traumas that they witness, and these can be varying, right? Like, you have students that are upset and crying due to poor family situations at home, right? And depending on your background, it could be triggering for you, right? And so there's those situations. Abuse at home, whether you're a witness or a victim, right? Like, so if there's abuse at home and you're coming in to try to study, and something happened, or there was a police action at your house, that could be very traumatizing. And many times teachers, educators, administrators, support staff, if it's a police issue, this is probably not the first time that this has happened. And it can wear on you. And for kids, there's the devastating effect of divorce. So, you know, I hate to use the word simple, but a simple divorce can be devastating for kids. And when educators see kids that normally were not struggling, who suddenly struggling for some reason, your heart, just kind of was like, oh, what's going on? And then when you hear why, your heart just goes out to them. Um, but for me, and I have to believe that I speak for many educators. Um, the one that just hurts the most is when kids are victims in their own houses. And I'm going to share this story with you, and it's not an easy one to hear, and honestly, I still get choked up 15 years later, and probably not for the reasons that you're going to think in the beginning. Um, and I'm not going to get graphic, but uh, this is a story that illustrates just some of the terrible burdens that some of the kids bring to school with them, and you don't know it. You just don't know it. And maybe over time it, you know, comes out, but then you start to think back, well, this is why it's impossible for them to sit down, be quiet, and concentrate on your work because they are just being devastated at home. So I had a third grader who was exhibiting some problematic behavior, and in the early grades, it started with swearing, you know, kind of normal, things. And it progressed a little bit with physical aggression when he got upset and those kinds of things. And by second grade, there were some incidents of him getting upset and swearing, and then becoming physically aggressive. There were still those were happening, and then there was the inappropriate um, kicking and hitting boys in their private parts. And so in third grade, um, we're like, okay, you know, it is what it is, and we're trying to figure this out. And meanwhile, we have him working with our counselor. From actually K to third grade, he had been working with a counselor. He had been, and just kind of really just being a kid and giving kid answers, and really, nothing that we could really show as alarming. And so in third grade, all these things are still happening, and we start to see this increase of some sexually explicit references and some concerning behaviors. And we're like, okay, so we're now, like, now this is brought to my level. Now I'm the principal, and this is brought to me, and we're like, we're having concerns. I'm like, okay, um remember, teachers and stuff are mandated reporters,
Right.
so you have to report this. But back in those days, it wasn't like it is today where you report any suspicion. Back then, you had to have some sort of evidence to take to the police, because otherwise the police or CPS wouldn't even touch it.
Right.
And so the burden was on us, the school. And I'm ill equipped to, talk with parents about, these things. And so as a school, we're expecting, we're suspecting something's wrong at home, but and he's still pretty button lipped. He won't say anything, and all those kinds of things. So um we get to about 3/4 of the year, and we start going back through kindergarten, our notes through kindergarten through third grade now. And I kind of throw my hands up, and I'm like, before this gets any worse, I said, we're going to the police. And I actually knew one of the police officers, detective, and I said, I'm going to call him. And I had a conversation with him, and he's like, like, maybe your best bet is to go to CPS with this. I said, okay. So, so I called him for advice and went to CPS, and CPS was like, mm, you know, we're gonna we'll look into it, right? So they start looking into it, and um, it evolves pretty quickly. I will just say that it was finally discovered that this child was suffering horrific sexual abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse at the hands of his mother and his father. And when protective services came to finally remove the child, they had to do it after school for whatever they were supposed to do it on a Saturday, and there was this whole like schedule. It was just a big mess, and they had to come to school to do it. And we were just like, okay, do we prepare him? And they're like, no, no, that's our job. We'll do that, this, that, and the other thing. Lo and behold, as it happened, the parents came that day to pick them up. Like one of two times ever they came to pick him up that day. Don't know if they knew something was going on or what, but they came to pick him up. And just as the CPS workers were walking him out the door, thankfully, we had our liaison officer there who was teaching a DARE class. He quickly called for backup, and we immediately turned the kid around and brought him in the school. But then the parents came up to the school saying, who are those two people with him, and all these kinds of things. And then it started to dawn on him when the CPS officers told him that he was going to live with another family, that he was going to be taken, like he wasn't going to see his parents. Like, yeah, all of a sudden, this started all, and the screams, just the screams that came from this little boy about, I want to go with my mom, I want to go with my dad, right? And I love my mom, I love my dad, and those screams are I just can't shake that. Like being ripped from your family. I was not prepared for that scene. And that haunts me today, to know that I was part of that. I was a participant in that. And ultimately, I caused that to happen. Now, I justify it with the idea that, this is the best thing for this kid. I know that I was not the only one that was affected deeply by this. Talking to, others, and what we didn't do a good job of, what we really did not do a good job of, and I think we do a better job today, but we just missed the boat completely on it, was self-care. We did nothing for me. We did nothing for the teachers involved. We did nothing for, our support staff that was involved. And we just went on about our day the next day. And that was hard. And I feel bad, I share this story because that's just one. That's just one of the stories. Now that's the one that really, really got to me. Uh, but there's always that one, and that's my one. And like I said, it's been more than 15 years, and it still gets to me. It very much gets to me, and I think about it, you know, a fair amount.
I think most of us have one. And I think you also hit on a really important piece of that, which is because for so long there were no systems in place to help with the processing of the kinds of horrific things. I mean, is it every year? No. Is
Right.
it, hundreds of students that go through your classroom? Maybe, but maybe not.
Mhm.
Um, these incidences, while not happening every day of our careers, once is enough
Yeah.
to necessitate us needing some help processing what we've had to cope with. And I do believe in terms of things that I advocate for in this platform, that's one of them. I mean, yes, we've talked about trauma and stress and burnout and self-care, but this piece is crucial for educators to have help processing some of the things that come their way, things that most of us would run 100 miles away to not have to experience. So I'm sorry that you had to experience that. And I appreciate for those other people out there who have experienced these things that you shared your story. I am going to go ahead and switch tracks on us though, which
Okay.
um I say it's a little bit of emotional whiplash because like I said, the blessing is that I think there are more of these kinds of incidents than there are the horrific ones. And that is some of them are at our expense even, and that is that kids are hilarious. Um, they really I know on my darkest days, when I went through my divorce, I 100% feel like my class that year saved me. They could make me laugh when no one else could. And so let's go in that direction now. What's one of your funniest moments as an educator?
Oh my God. One funny moment? Oh,
Yeah, you got to
oh,
pick a good one.
oh, pick a good one. Oh, so I was very very active in my schools. I really tried to get in the classrooms a lot, and I like to have a lot of fun with the kids and do a lot of different things. So they always made me laugh, and honestly, that was my therapy. When I was having a tough time, with parents or school board or policies or whatever, budget, state mandated reporting or state assessments, I would just get up and I'd walk. I'd go into classrooms and I would just disrupt everything in the classroom and
As long
just
as you know it was a disruption. Every educator
absolutely.
out there is appreciating you owning that.
Absolutely, it was indeed, and everybody knew that. Oh, Tim, this is a little therapy for Tim. So they all let me have it, and I very much appreciated them. And so, one funny story: um, we had a pro basketball player that came to an assembly, and he was talking about determination. And he was telling a story about, Michael Jordan, not making the eighth grade basketball team or high school basketball team or whatever it was. And, how you need to, really persevere and go through these things. And while he was talking, he was shooting free throws. And I'll be if he didn't make like 99% of those free throws while he's talking and he's walking around the court and then he just walks over to the free throw line and he shoots a free throw and he'll go to the other end of the court, and he's walking and talking to the kids. He's going up in the stands and he's coming around. Then he stands at the free throw line and shoots another one in. And and so, he's wrapping up and he's like, does anybody here know how to shoot a free throw? And, all the kids raise their hand, right? And there is this child who has Down syndrome, and he is just a basketball, he loves basketball. He just, and he was standing up, he was cheering, and he, like, and so the basketball player, knew that he was really excited, and this, that, and the other thing. And so he said, how about you and I, he pulled him out of all the kids, he pulled this kid out. He goes, how about you and I have a free throw contest, right? So, the kid's all excited and everything. And what the basketball player didn't know was the only thing that this child took away from basketball, the one thing that he did, it was almost like a stimming, like he was the basketball. He always had a basketball in his hand. Couldn't pass. He really couldn't dribble. He dribbled off his foot more than he did anything else, right? But the one thing he could do, shoot a free throw. This kid probably shot thousands of free throws in a week because he would come before school. His parents would drop him off before school. Our rule was, if there's an adult with you, you may shoot free throws. So he would stay after school, and at lunch, we had our cafeteria in the gym, but after lunch was over, we'd clear, and we always had 5 minutes, maybe. He would come in and shoot free throws. He shot free throws, and the best part about this is, because he shot free throws, like I said, he couldn't pass. He could not dribble, like literally could not dribble anything. For whatever reason, he made almost 100% of his free throws. So you've got this NBA guy, you got this NBA star, and he's like, he throws a first one up and it's a brick, right? Because he knows the kid's going to miss, right? And so the child is all excited, and everybody in the school knows what's going on except for this basketball player. And this guy has because they're all starting to chant. They're all starting, because they know what's going to happen. So the poor child, he picks up the ball. First thing he does is he goes to dribble the ball, and he gets about 2 to 3 dribbles in, and it goes off his foot, right? Like normal, so he goes and gets another ball. So he goes up to the line now, and he does his 3 bounce routine, sets, all net. And the basketball player is like, wow, okay, great, And so the basketball player gets up there, and he bricks one again, and like it's off the backboard, and and because he's thinking, this kid can't even dribble, let alone, and he got a lucky shot. So as we're going along, you can see that the basketball player is like, now he makes one, and our student makes one, and then he makes another, and like they're now going back, and you can start to see that the basketball player is like trying to figure out like what, and our student body is going nuts. They're just jumping up and down and everything, and so the basketball player, he's like, to his credit, I give this guy all the credit in the world. He's like, well, this was going to be to 10, but do you want to keep going? And they're like, yeah. Or the student was like, yeah, of course, he's so excited. They just kept going. And believe it or not, the student beat the NBA player by 1 basket. And I asked the NBA player later, I said, this was getting long. I said, did you throw that one? He goes, no, I missed it. He goes, your kid beat me. He goes, now your kid is the only kid that ever has beat me in free throws because I own the free throw line. I have, in my career, I'm like, he was telling me he's like 97 or some ridiculous number of free throws. He owns that line. And he goes, your kid legitimately beat me. And I was like, oh, wow. And he goes, do you mind? And I won't use his name or anything, but do you mind if I tell this story when I travel around? And I
Oh,
said, no,
that.
and so here this kid is, Down syndrome and all those kinds of things. And he beat an NBA basketball player in a free throw contest.
I
And so, yeah. So I don't know if that's funny, charming, heartwarming, or what, but
all of the above.
the look on the basketball player's face and our student body and teachers and everybody. And then they got their picture in the paper. We talked about, how he beat them and, all this kind of stuff. And again, to the basketball player's credit, in the paper, he did say he legitimately beat me.
Oh.
So, yeah. So, that's my funny or heartwarming story.
I love it. I love it. Well, I'm gonna have to go because I have to be somewhere at 8, but
No worries.
let's do a final question here. I can go all the way up to 8. So,
All right.
all right. And finally, is there anything else that you would like to share before we end this?
You know, yeah, there is actually. I want a message to the teachers, a message to the educators, the message to those administrators that are feeling caught in the middle. My message to them is, if you're staying in the fight, kudos to you. You have all of my respect, and I think that's an admirable thing to do. And I wish you the best of luck. And I just cannot say enough about what you're doing for kids. And despite all the distractions outside of your classroom, your office, in the community, keep doing the great work that you're doing. And it's so, so valuable and appreciated.
Thanks for
To
that,
the
Tim.
to the educators that are leaving, to the educators that are burned out, that are transitioning, know that there is life after education. You're not just a teacher. You're not just an administrator or support staff or central office, or you're not just a superintendent. You have skills that you don't even realize you have, because nobody has said to you, you have these skills. Nobody has laid out the kinds of skills that teachers have and routinely do on a daily basis. You are masters of crowd control. You are masters of preparation. You are masters of taking the complex and making it simple. So, for those of you that are leaving, please understand, you're not quitting. You're moving on. You're going on to something different, and you will find your fire again. You will find your passion again. And you may feel burnt out. You may feel beat up. You may feel just really disheartened. Okay. Those are legitimate emotions to feel, and that's okay, because you have a ton to offer. Like I said, industry should be. Now we get into the idea whether or not they're going to hire you, but they should be looking at people with your skill set, someone who is so adaptable. Teachers, I can't think of a more adaptable group than teachers, or, oh my gosh, principals. Like, One minute you're getting, something from central office that says this. Next minute you have the state mandate that says this. And like you're turning around and your teachers are looking at you like, do you not know what's going on? And you have to look them right square in the face and say, no, I don't. I got this, and then I got this, and I know they're opposites, and we're gonna go with it. And so, you put a good spin on it, you put a smile on it, and you go on with your day. And so those people that are transitioning, again, you're not quitting. You have all of our respect, and you did a great job. You gave it all you had, and that's all anyone can ask. So now move on. And I know this is kind of cliche, but walk out the door with your head held high. You did everything you could, and now it's time to transition into your next adventure where you're going to be a star, just like you were in school.
And you can come on my podcast.
There you go. Absolutely.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for agreeing to come on my podcast. It has been my pleasure to have you.
It really has been my pleasure and my honor to be here and talk with a fellow educator and fellow expat. People love, they romanticize the expat life, and I can tell you from my travels and with all my kids' travels and things, it is glamorous in many, many ways, but you get really caught. There were times that I would come home and wish that I was back in China. And there's times in China I was like, oh my God, I'm just longing for an American burger, and want to come home. And you miss your family, you miss, all the conveniences you have. But yet in China, some of the things like WeChat were fantastic. How we don't have that here in the US is beyond me, other than the fact that everything on WeChat, government controlled. So you got that.
Yeah, I'm definitely feeling that on this trip. I haven't been back for 2 years. So I
Ah,
just got back Thursday. And
oh, okay.
so I haven't been here too long. And yeah, I miss Portugal, but I also
Right.
am glad to be here, so it is that dichotomy, right?
Absolutely. And emotionally, it's a little difficult to kind of change, think about. And you've been gone for 2 years straight.
hmm Yeah, I haven't been
So
back.
even in 2 years, you've probably seen some subtle changes that you're like, oh, this is
Absolutely.
weird. There is, and I would never have believed it. I didn't believe it until it happened to me. But there is a thing.
I wish I knew, wish I knew.
Today's episode was produced and edited by me. The theme music is by Otis McDonald featuring Joni Inez. If you know someone who might enjoy these conversations, please share the podcast episodes as much and as often as you can. It's as simple as copying the link you use to access today's episode and sending it in a message or sharing it on social media. I'm a small, independent operation, and your shares broaden our audience. Perhaps you or someone you know will be inspired to talk about teacher burnout. If you would like to get your voice on my podcast, contact me via the link on my webpage, tot.buzzsprout.com. Coach, speaker, and author Rashid Ogunlaru said, "It may take many voices for people to hear the same message." Join me in being one of the many voices rising up to get the message out around educator burnout. This is Melissa LaFleur. Thank you for listening to Tot, the podcast.
I wish I knew.